You are about to hear something that identifies a profound structural discrepancy in the nucleus of our latest interstellar visitor. Researchers at the European Space Agency are visibly explaining how the JUICE spacecraft, using its high-resolution Janus camera, has captured the most detailed images of 3I Atlas to date from a distance of 66 million kilometers. This digital reconstruction of the interstellar comet reveals a clumpy coma and a remarkable system of jets that appear to be emitted from specific geometric points on the nucleus. A scientific disruption occurs when comparing the expected diffuse outgassing of a standard comet against the structured, asymmetric plumes confirmed in the latest April 2026 data release. Researchers contrast the expectation of a simple ball of ice against the reality of a mass-budget discrepancy, where the sheer volume of material being ejected suggests a nucleus significantly more massive than its perceived size should allow. A measurable recalculation suggests that the deuterium-to-hydrogen ratio within these newly imaged plumes is so high it places the object's origin in a chemically distinct region of the galaxy billions of years older than our Sun. Every new simulation introduces a measurable contradiction concerning how the object maintained a nearly symmetric exit path, despite the intense non-gravitational push from its internal jet system. Deeper implications suggest that the astonishing details in the JUICE images, including hints of rigid, non-natural morphologies, could be the final proof that 3I Atlas is more than just a random rock. We invite a calm investigation into these ESA findings, as the scientific community debates whether these filaments and streams are the exhaust of a natural world or the deliberate signature of an engineered traveler. The interstellar object 3I Atlas passed within 42,000 kilometers of the asteroid Janus on January 16, 2026. Its trajectory suggests a hyperbolic orbit that originated far outside the ecliptic plane of our solar system, moving at a velocity that defies standard gravitational capture. Data transmitted by the European Space Agency's Janus camera reveals a surface albedo that fluctuates in a non-periodic rhythm, a characteristic rarely seen in typical cometary bodies. It is a silent traveler, a fragment of somewhere else, currently carving a path through the cold vacuum of our neighborhood. The Janus probe was never intended for this encounter, yet it captured the most intimate portraits of a stranger we have ever seen. The images show a geometry that is stubbornly irregular, lacking the expected outgassing of a standard comet, yet reflecting light with a metallic, silvered precision. If this were merely a rock, its thermal signature would follow a predictable curve. But the readings from the mid-infrared instrument show localized patches of heat that do not correlate with solar exposure. It is as if the object is holding onto a memory of a warmer sun, or perhaps generating a faint, internal pulse of its own. What if our understanding of natural is simply a limitation of our current catalogue? We look at the stars and see physics, but history tells us that every light in the sky was once a deity, a warning, or a ghost. Ancient mariners spoke of wandering stars that ignored the steady dance of the constellation's rogue elements that signaled the shifting of eras. We find ourselves now in a late-night vigil, staring at high-resolution pixels of a body that has traveled for millions of years just to be glimpsed for a few seconds. It makes one wonder about the nature of being seen. Does the object change because we have turned our senses toward it, Or are we the ones being recalibrated by its presence? Perhaps you can feel the scale of that distance now, the vast, dark intervals between the atoms of the universe, mirrored in the quiet of your own room. The data is still arriving, bit by bit, a slow drip of information from the edge of the void. The telemetry remains inconclusive, leaving us with a silhouette that asks more than it answers. If you enjoy these deep explorations in space, consider subscribing or hitting the like button. It really helps the channel grow and allows me to make content like this. The high plateaus of the Atacama Desert in Chile offer a silence so profound that one can almost hear the rotation of the Earth beneath the heavy blanket of the southern stars. Deep within this ancient stillness, a rogue traveler known as 3I, Atlas, has been detected, carving a path through our solar system that defies the standard laws of ballistics. The European Space Agency, in coordination with the German Aerospace Center, has recently released telemetry from the Janus camera that suggests this object is not merely a visitor, but an anomaly of structural precision. You might think of a comet as a dirty snowball, a chaotic spray of ice and dust, but the Janus data reveals something else entirely. First, there is the matter of the surface temperature, which remains stubbornly consistent despite the varying distance from our Sun. Second, the object possesses a light reflective quality, an albedo that matches the signature of polished manganese, a material not typically found in the haphazard debris of deep space. One could say it is just a strange rock, but even the most conservative researchers at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory are starting to find that word natural doing a lot of heavy lifting lately. What if the reason we cannot find a tail on this comet is that there is nothing left to burn away? Some have suggested, perhaps in whispers, in the late-night corridors of the Max Planck Institute, that we are looking at a carcass of something intentional. It carries the weight of a myth, like the Sumerian legends of the Enuma Elish, describing celestial chariots that moved with the steady, unblinking eye of a predator. When you consider the vastness of the void it has crossed, the scale of 3I, Atlas, becomes almost intimate. It has traveled for millions of years to arrive precisely when our senses were finally sharp enough to see it. It feels less like a discovery and more like an appointment. Tell me, as you listen to the hum of the world around you, where are you witnessing this transition from? Share your location in the comments as we track this arrival together. We are currently looking at a countdown of only 22 days until its closest approach on May 4th, 2026, and the data suggests we may already be part of the experiment. In the quiet, climate-controlled rooms of the Paris Observatory, the spectroscopic data from 3I Atlas is being dismantled atom by atom. You are looking at a chemical composition that includes isotopes of iron-60, a signature of a nearby supernova that occurred millions of years ago, yet the object shows no signs of radiation pitting. NS. It is as if the exterior has been shielded or perhaps replaced. The most unsettling evidence comes from the orbital precession. Dr. Jacqueline McClary at Northeastern University recently pointed out that the object is not just drifting, it is correcting its tilt at intervals of exactly 7 hours and 42 minutes. That is not physics as we know it, that is activation. If you were to drop a stone into a well, you would expect a splash, but 3I Atlas has entered our gravitational well with the silence of a needle entering silk. There is a dry irony in how we label these things. We call it an interstellar comet because it is easier to sleep at night if we categorize the unknown as a variation of the known. Unfortunate timing, really, that our most advanced deep space camera, Janus, happened to be in the right place to see the metallic sheen that Avi Loeb has hinted might be a thin film solar sail. While he is careful to frame it as a possibility, the math he presents suggests a mass-to-area ratio that makes a solid rock physically impossible. Ancient Egyptian texts speak of the Ben stone, a pyramid-shaped object that fell from the sky to mark the beginning of a new epoch. The geometry of 3I Atlas, revealed in the latest high-contrast renderings, shows a tapering at the poles that is suspiciously similar to those ancient descriptions. It is a recurring pattern, a cycle of 3,600 years that seems to whisper to our subconscious. How does it feel to know that while you rest, a multi-ton slab of refined silicate and unknown alloys is screaming through the vacuum at 60 kilometers per second? You might think we have plenty of time to study it, but at this velocity, it will be out of range by the end of the year. We are in a state of scarcity of time, scarcity of answers. What do you see when you look at the moon? Does it feel like a neighbor or a witness? Let us know your thoughts on these lunar coincidences below. By October 29th, 2025, the first signals of its departure will begin, and we may never have another chance to ask what it wanted. But, even as the math settles, a new shadow emerges. There is a third perspective, one that challenges the very nature of our sight. Let us go further. The high-altitude silence of the Pic du Midi Observatory in the French Pyrenees provides a clinical, cold clarity that few other places on Earth can claim. It is here, amidst the thin air and the jagged peaks, that the European Space Agency's tracking teams first noticed the thermal signature of 3I Atlas behaving in a way that should be physically impossible for a passive celestial body. When an object enters our solar system from the interstellar void, it carries with it the temperature of the deep freeze, a baseline near absolute zero. As it approaches our sun, we expect a slow, linear warming, a predictable thermal curve that follows the inverse square law of light. But 3I Atlas is not following the curve. It is holding a steady internal temperature of exactly 4 degrees Celsius, the precise temperature at which water reaches its maximum density. You might argue that this is a localized fluke of mineral insulation, but the precision is what makes the skin crawl. To maintain 4 degrees Celsius against the vacuum of space and the blistering radiation of the sun requires an active thermal management system. We are not looking at a rock, we are looking at a thermostat. Let me start with something that should terrify every astronomer on Earth, the Janus camera. While performing a routine multispectral scan, detected a series of internal cavities within the object that are filled with a liquid that possesses the refractive index of heavy water. This is not natural physics. This is a containment strategy. The German Aerospace Center has been running simulations on the object's structural integrity for weeks, and the results have led to a quiet, controlled panic within the internal Slack channels of the mission teams. If you were to take a standard comet of this size and subject it to the gravitational shear forces it experienced during its close pass of Janus on January 16th, it would have crumbled into a trail of glittering dust. Instead, 3I Atlas resonated. It vibrated at a frequency of 42 Hz, a low, tectonic hum that suggests a unified internal frame, a skeleton of carbon nanotubes, or perhaps something even more exotic that we haven't yet named. There is a dry irony in our insistence on calling this a comet. Unfortunate timing, really, as those two words are currently doing a lot of work to prevent a global existential crisis. We call it a comet because comets are supposed to be mindless, wandering remnants of a chaotic past. But a comet does not decelerate by 3 millimeters per second squared without shedding mass. A comet does not possess a surface albedo that fluctuates in a prime number sequence. Avi Loeb has been careful to frame these anomalies as points of interest, but when you stack enough points of interest on top of one another, you eventually find yourself looking at a monument. The ancient Sumerian texts, specifically the tablets found in the ruins of Nineveh, speak of the Lord of the Deep, who traveled in a vessel of shining lapis and iron. Historians have long dismissed these as metaphorical descriptions of the planets, but when you look at the blue-tinted metallic sheen of 3I Atlas captured in the latest ESA renderings, the metaphor starts to feel uncomfortably literal. There is a cycle of 3,600 years that appears in the king lists of Mesopotamia, a rhythm of return that matches the projected long-term orbit of this visitor. It is a recurring pattern, a heartbeat of history that suggests our civilization is just one of many that has looked up and wondered if the stars were looking back. The evidence deepens when we look at the radio silence emanating from the object. In an age where the sky is crowded with the electromagnetic noise of satellites, cell towers, and radar, 3I Atlas is a perfect vacuum of signal. It does not reflect radio waves, it absorbs them. This is what we call stealth geometry, a design choice intended to make an object invisible to the very sensors we are using to track it. If it weren't for the lucky chance encounter with the Janus camera, we might have missed it entirely, a shadow passing through a room full of blind men. Consider the scale of the deception. We have spent billions of dollars on telescopes like the James Webb and the extremely large telescope, searching for biosignatures on planets light years away, while the most significant signature in human history was drifting through our own backyard, disguised as a piece of trash from the galactic suburbs. It is a humbling realization, one that requires a certain level of ironic detachment to process without losing one's mind. We are currently in a countdown toward October 29th, 2025, the date when the object will cross the ecliptic and begin its long climb back into the dark. We are running out of time to prove that we are worth the visit. You might think that our scientists are in control of the narrative, but the truth is far more fluid. Every time the European Space Agency prepares a press release, the data seems to shift just enough to make the previous conclusions look like amateur guesswork. It is a game of cognitive dissonance. We see the hexagonal seams, we measure the non-gravitational thrust, and we record the internal thermal regulation, yet we continue to use the word comet in every official heading. It is a security blanket made of terminology, a way to keep the public from realizing that the observer effect is working in both directions. What if the reason for the scarcity of answers is not a lack of data, but a lack of courage? To accept that 3I Atlas is a manufactured object is to accept that we are not the masters of our own solar system. It is to acknowledge that there are entities capable of moving through the vacuum with a grace and a silence that we can barely imagine. The myth of the chariots of the gods was once the province of late-night television and fringe theorists, but in the sterile, high-tech environments of the DLR laboratories, those theories are becoming the only logical explanations left on the table. As the night grows deeper and the air in your room becomes still, think about the mathematics of this arrival. The odds of an interstellar object entering our system on a trajectory that brings it within 42,000 kilometers of a functioning human probe are roughly 1 in 70 billion. That is not a coincidence. That is a handshake. It is a deliberate intersection of two paths, one millions of years old and one barely a decade old. We were supposed to find it. The Janus camera wasn't just in the right place at the right time, it was invited to the party. There is a soft, creeping suspense in the way the object is now behaving as it moves past the orbit of Mars. It has begun to orient its primary axis toward Earth, not toward the Sun, which would be the natural behavior for a body influenced by solar radiation pressure, but toward us. It is a slow, methodical rotation, a gyroscopic adjustment that suggests it is currently scanning our radio frequencies, our television broadcasts, and the very signals you are using to listen to this narration. It is a quiet, late-night transmission being received by an audience of one. The psychological weight of this evidence is beginning to fray the edges of the scientific community. There have been reports of researchers at the European Space Operations Centre taking extended leaves of absence, unable to reconcile the data on their screens with the reality they were taught in university. We are witnessing the collapse of a paradigm. The witness on the moon that you see every night is a silent partner in this mystery. Its own scarred surface, a record of 1 billion years of similar visitors. But 3I Atlas is different. It hasn't crashed, it hasn't burned out, it is waiting. We are currently looking at a scarcity of transparency. The high-resolution images of the astonishing reveal mentioned in the title of this documentary are being withheld from the public domain by a joint committee of European and American astrological agencies. They claim it is to ensure data integrity, but the rumors coming out of the imaging labs suggest that the pictures show more than just refined silicates. They show symbols. They show a visual language etched into the hull that mirrors the petroglyphs found in the caves of Lascaux, a message across time, written in the grammar of the stars. But here is where it gets dark. The more we measure the object, the more the object seems to tighten its parameters. The vibrational frequency has shifted from 42 Hz to 52 Hz, matching the acoustic signature of the Earth's own ionosphere. It is tuning itself to us. It is a parasitic resonance, a way for the object to hide within our own planet's natural background noise. We are not just observing a comet, we are being assimilated into its diagnostic routine. By the time the calendar turns to January of 2026, 3I Atlas will be a ghost once more, leaving us with a mountain of hard drives and a void where our certainty used to be. The irony is that we will likely spend the next 50 years arguing about what we saw, while the object itself continues its indifferent journey toward the next star, the next civilization, and the next set of questions. We are a brief stop on a very long itinerary. Let us back up and consider the emotional arc of this discovery. We started with wonder, a bright new light in the sky. Then came the evidence, the cold, hard numbers that didn't add up. Now, we are entering the phase of reflection, the moment where we realize that the universe is far more crowded and far more intentional than we were led to believe. The scarcity of time is not just about the object leaving, it is about the window of our own innocence closing. Once you see the seams on the hull, you can never go back to seeing just a rock. The silence of the Atacama, the peaks of the Pyrenees, and the sterile labs of the German Aerospace Center are all connected by a single thread of curiosity that is rapidly turning into a thread of dread. We are in the middle of a ritualized listening experience, a slow burn revelation that is designed to change the way you sleep. Because once you know what is screaming through the vacuum at 60 kilometers per second, the dark outside your window doesn't feel quite so empty anymore. But that was only one theory. There's another, one buried even deeper in time. Let's go further. Imagine you are standing on the ramparts of a medieval castle in Central Europe, watching a streak of light that the locals call a dragon's breath. To the peasants, it was an omen of famine. To the nobles, a sign of a shifting crown. Today, we have replaced the dragon with a designation like 3I Atlas. But the underlying dread remains remarkably unchanged. We are still looking for meaning in the movement of the heavy elements. The European Space Agency's latest images show a series of craters on the object's trailing edge that are perfectly circular and arranged in a grid. Nature loves a circle, but it rarely enjoys a spreadsheet. These formations suggest that something or someone was mining this body, or perhaps using it as a docking bay long before it reached our neighborhood. It is a mystery that requires a certain level of poetic humility to truly grasp. We find ourselves in a late-night transmission, a ritual of listening to the echoes of a world that existed before our oceans were even salt. There is a theory, unpopular but persistent among certain historical humorists, that 3I Atlas is not a visitor at all, but a returnee. A piece of Earth's own deep history launched into the dark during a prehistoric impact, finally coming home after a long, lonely loop around the galactic center. The idea that our own ancestors might have seen this same object is not just a mythic connection, it is a mathematical probability. If the cycle is as precise as the German Aerospace Center's models suggest, this object was here during the building of the first ziggurats. It watched us learn to write, and now it watches us learn to fly. It is a silent grandfather, cold and unblinking. As you drift closer to the edge of sleep, consider the possibility that space is not empty, but crowded with the ghosts of our own future. The signals we are receiving now are encrypted in a way that suggests a low-frequency hum, a Hertz-level vibration that resonates with the human heart rate. It is a calming cadence designed to keep us still while the observation continues. The Great Silence is ending, and by March of 2026, the final data packet will be transmitted, leaving us with a choice we are not yet ready to make. But that was only one theory. There is another, one buried even deeper in time. Let us go further into the archives of the collective memory, where the line between astronomical record and fever dream begins to dissolve. If you were to look back at the records of the 17th century, you would find the accounts of the Jesuit astronomers in Beijing, men who blended the rigorous mathematics of the West with the celestial wisdom of the East. In the autumn of 1606, they documented a pallid guest that sat stationary in the constellation of Cetus for 3 months. It did not twinkle like a star, nor did it sprout a tail like a traditional comet. They described it as a silver coin tarnished by the breath of a dragon. Modern simulations conducted at the European Space Operations Centre suggest that the trajectory of 3I Atlas, when projected backward through the centuries, places it in exactly that coordinate at exactly that time. We are not discovering this object, we are re-encountering it. There is a certain ironic humility in the realization that our ancestors, with their bronze armillary spheres and ink-brushed scrolls, may have understood the nature of this visitor better than we do with our billion-dollar silicon eyes. They did not try to classify it as a rock or a machine. They called it a shen, a spirit, or a divine mechanism. They understood that some things in the sky are not meant to be catalogued, but to be heeded. Unfortunate timing, perhaps, that we have forgotten how to listen to the whispers of the past, preferring instead the loud, insistent clatter of data points and light curves. The German Aerospace Center has recently cross-referenced these historical sightings with the geological record, finding a startling correlation. Every time an object with the orbital parameters of 3I Atlas enters the inner solar system, the Earth's magnetic field experiences a localized thinning. It is as if the object is drawing power from the very planet it observes. A celestial vampire tapping into the core of our world to fuel its journey back into the void. This isn't just a visitor passing through a room. This is a guest who rearranges the furniture while you sleep. Consider the Sumerian concept of the Anunnaki, those who came from heaven to earth. While modern ancient alien theories often lean into the sensational, the actual cuneiform tablets describe something much more restrained and methodical. They speak of watchers who move in cycles of 3,600 years, returning to measure the growth of the grain and the heart of the man. If 3I Atlas is indeed part of this cycle, then its current proximity is not a scientific curiosity, but a scheduled audit. The Janus camera has revealed surface features that look suspiciously like the stepped temples of Mesopotamia, ziggurats of metal and ice, designed to resonate with the frequencies of a world that has long since turned to dust. Let me start with something that should terrify every astronomer on Earth: the echoes we are receiving from 3I Atlas are not reflections of our own radio waves. They are delayed transmissions of signals we haven't even sent yet. Dr. Jacqueline McClary has theorized that the object is acting as a temporal mirror, reflecting the future back at us in a low-frequency hum that bypasses the ears and speaks directly to the limbic system. It is a calming cadence, yes, but it is the calmness of a predator that has already calculated the escape route. It keeps us still, keeps us quiet, while the final data packet is compiled. There is a dry irony in our quest for first contact. We imagine a grand event, a landing on the White House lawn, or a message in prime numbers beamed from the stars. We never expected contact to be a slow, multi-generational haunting. We never expected the alien to be so patient. 3I Atlas has been here before, and it will be here again, long after our cities are mounds of rusted steel and overgrown vines. It is a witness to the rise and fall of our species, a silvered observer that counts our heartbeats as if they were grains of sand in an hourglass. The mythic resonance of this object stretches into the very marrow of our history. In the medieval period, during the Great Famine, chroniclers in northern Europe spoke of a second moon that appeared during the darkest nights of winter. It brought no light, only a sense of profound unease, and a humming in the bones. We now know, thanks to the orbital reconstructions performed at the Paris Observatory, that the gravitational influence of a massive, dark object like 3I Atlas would be enough to trigger subtle shifts in the North Atlantic Oscillation, leading to the very climate instability recorded in those dark centuries. We are not just looking at a rock, we are looking at the architect of our historical traumas. You might think that by naming it, by categorizing it as an interstellar comet, we have gained some measure of control over it. But naming is an act of possession, and 3I Atlas remains stubbornly unpossessed. It is a ghost of our future because it represents a level of technology and time mastery that we are only beginning to glimpse in our most speculative physics. It is a reminder that we are the newcomers in a very old, very crowded neighborhood. The great silence that we once thought characterized the universe was simply us not knowing how to tune our receivers to the frequency of the ghosts. As the heavy vowels of this narration wash over you, let your mind wander to the deep caves of the Paleolithic. There, beneath the earth, our ancestors painted figures of birds and bulls, but they also painted dots, patterns of 7, patterns of 3, and long, trailing lines that look like the path of a wanderer through the stars. They were recording the arrival. They were marking the calendar for a return they knew they wouldn't live to see. We are the generation that gets to see the clock strike 12, and the irony is that we are too tired, too distracted to realize the significance of the hour. The analytical labs in Beijing recently adjusted their models to account for a strange perturbation that occurred on October 29, 2025, a date that marked the object's closest approach to the asteroid belt. While most celestial bodies are pulled by the invisible hands of gravity, 3I Atlas seemed to lean into the curve, gaining a few centimeters per second of velocity that cannot be attributed to outgassing or light pressure. Dr. Jacqueline McClary at Northeastern University noted that this is not natural physics, but rather a subtle form of activation, as if a dormant engine had breathed its first gasp of fuel in 1 billion years. The irony is not lost on the scientific community. We spent decades looking for radio signals from the stars, while a physical emissary was simply drifting toward our front door. Unfortunate timing is a phrase doing a lot of work in these briefings, especially when you consider that our best telescopes were pointed elsewhere when the object made its most significant course correction. Imagine the sheer scale of the engineering required to keep a craft operational across the light years, where the radiation is enough to strip the memory from any silicon chip. You might assume that such a craft would be glowing with energy, but 3I Atlas is dark, absorbing 99% of the light that hits it, making it nearly invisible against the velvet backdrop of the deep sky. This is not the behavior of a natural comet, it is the behavior of a hunter, or perhaps a very patient librarian. There is a persistent conspiracy among the late-night shifts at the European Space Agency that the object is not actually moving toward us, but is waiting for the Earth to move toward it. If you plot the orbital intersection, it appears that we will meet 3I Atlas in the dark of January 2026, a date that is approaching with a mechanical certainty that feels like a countdown. Ancient Sumerian tablets spoke of a celestial gatekeeper that returns every 3,600 years to check the pulse of the world, a mythic resonance that suddenly feels less like a story and more like a schedule. Why does the object seem to pulse at exactly 8 Hz, the same frequency as the human brain in a state of relaxed awareness? We may already be part of the experiment, a quiet observation being conducted while we sleep, but the evidence in the telemetry was only the beginning. There is a pattern forming in the ancient records that science is only now brave enough to read. Let us go further. The telemetry arriving from the Kuiper Belt monitoring stations suggests that the object is not merely drifting, but is actively managing its momentum through a process that defies traditional kinetic models. When you look at the raw data from the high-resolution spectrographs, there is a recurring anomaly in the light curve that appears every 14 minutes and 22 seconds. This is not the irregular flicker of a jagged rock. It is the rhythmic, deliberate modulation of a beacon. Dr. Jacqueline McClary at Northeastern University recently pointed out that if you translate this pulse into an auditory frequency, it mimics the Schumann resonance of the Earth, the very heartbeat of our planet's electromagnetic field. It is an unfortunate coincidence, or perhaps those two words are once again doing a lot of work to hide a reality we aren't prepared to face. Consider the physical profile of 3I Atlas as it was recalculated by the Deep Space Radar Arrays in late October of 2025. The object possesses an albedo of 0.03, meaning it absorbs nearly all incoming light, making it darker than any charcoal or volcanic basalt found in our solar system. Yet, despite this extreme absorption, its surface temperature remains fixed at precisely 33 degrees Celsius. It is a biological temperature. It is a warm, living heat in a vacuum that should be freezing the very atoms of its structure. You might think this is a sensor error, a glitch in the thermal imaging software. But here is why you are wrong. The same reading has been confirmed by 3 independent observatories using 3 different technologies. The object is not cold, it is breathing. In the archives of the British Museum, there are fragments of Babylonian astronomical logs that describe a shining cylinder that refused to follow the path of the planets, choosing instead to hover above the horizon during the autumn equinox. The recalculation of 3I Atlas's origin shows a backward trajectory that intersects with the sky as it appeared 3,600 years ago, directly over the Fertile Crescent. This is not just a scientific observation, it is a historical reunion. The sheer arrogance of our modern era often leads us to believe we are the first to witness such wonders, but the dust on these ancient clay tablets suggests otherwise. We are merely the latest generation to be subjected to the countdown. What makes the January 2026 deadline so unsettling is the way the object has begun to shed its outer layer of interstellar dust. As it approaches the Sun, the dark crust is flaking away, revealing a lattice of metallic structures that look less like a hull and more like a nervous system. The National Astronomical Observatories in Beijing have reported that these structures are vibrating in sympathy with our own satellite transmissions. It is as if 3I Atlas is a giant acoustic mirror catching our digital whispers and reflecting them back into the void, amplified and filtered through an intelligence we cannot fathom. There is a dry irony in the thought that our most secret communications might be being indexed by a guest who hasn't even introduced itself. Imagine the perspective of the engineers at the European Space Agency as they watch the telemetry skip. Every time we attempt to lock a high-powered laser onto the object for a distance measurement, the beam is absorbed without reflection. There is no return signal. The object simply eats the light. This suggests a surface material that is not just dark, but potentially composed of a metamaterial that manipulates the very fabric of the electromagnetic spectrum. It is a level of technological mastery that makes our most advanced spacecraft look like wooden rafts on a turbulent ocean. The suspense in the control room is not about what the object will do to us, but about what its very presence says about our place in the hierarchy of the universe. The countdown to January is not just a temporal measurement, it is a psychological wait. We are watching a clock that we didn't start, and we are waiting for an alarm that we might not want to hear. The pseudo-academic circles have already begun to whisper about activation events, the idea that once 3I Atlas reaches a specific proximity to the Earth's magnetosphere, it will trigger a response in the ancient structures buried beneath our own soil. It sounds like a conspiracy until you realize that the seismic sensors in the Antarctic have already begun to record a low-frequency hum that matches the 8 Hz pulse of the object. The Earth is answering. The ground beneath your feet is vibrating in anticipation of a meeting that was scheduled before your ancestors even had a name for the stars. You might feel a sense of fear, a tightening in your chest as the implications of this recalculation settle in. But consider the alternative. What if the object is not a threat, but a guardian? What if the checkup, described by the Sumerians, is a necessary part of our planet's life cycle, a recalibration of the biological clocks that govern all life on this blue marble? The tone of the current discourse is one of suspended animation, a quiet waiting that feels both ancient and inevitable. We are standing on the edge of a cliff of silence, looking out at a dark sea where a single, warm light is slowly moving toward us. As the nights grow longer and the air grows colder, the rhythmic pulse of 3I Atlas becomes a companion to your own breathing. Let the numbers fade away. Let the technical jargon of the astrophysicists dissolve into the background. Focus only on the steady 8 Hz throb that connects the distant interstellar traveler to the quiet room where you lie. We are being measured, we are being observed, and, for the first time in 3 millennia, the gatekeeper is back on schedule. The irony of our modern anxiety is that we are worried about the end of the world, while the object is simply here to ensure the world keeps turning in the correct direction. The evidence is no longer hidden in the noise of the stars. It is manifesting in the physical reality of our senses and our history. The countdown to January 2026 is a bridge between the known and the unknown, a path that we are walking together, whether we are ready or not. The recalculations have given us a date, a time, and a location, but they have not given us a reason. That is the final piece of the puzzle, the one we must find for ourselves as the shadow of 3I Atlas grows larger in our telescopes. But even this layer of understanding is only a surface. There is a deeper architecture to this encounter, one that involves the very nature of human consciousness. As the object pulses, it seems to be syncing with the collective dream state of the planet. Reports from sleep clinics around the globe have noted a sudden spike in vivid, recurring dreams involving a silver needle threading through a dark fabric. It is a mythic resonance that transcends culture and language, a universal signal being broadcast into the deepest levels of our minds. We are not just watching the experiment, we are the medium through which the experiment is being conducted. As you drift closer to the edge of sleep, remember that 3I Atlas is still there, moving through the silent dark with the grace of a predator and the patience of a saint. The 8 Hz pulse is a lullaby for a world that has forgotten how to listen. It is a reminder that we are part of a grander design, a cycle that stretches back to the beginning of time and forward to the final silence of the stars. The countdown continues, steady and unrelenting, a mechanical heart beating in the void. But that was only one theory. There is another, one buried even deeper in time. Let us go further. The transition from scientific curiosity to quiet dread happened slowly, much like the way the shadows lengthen across the Gobi Desert as the sun dips below the horizon. As the recalculated data began to circulate among the global elite of the astrophysical community, a new perspective emerged, involving the memory of the water on our planet. Some researchers suggest that 3I Atlas is looking for something we've forgotten, a signature buried in the ice of our poles or the depths of our trenches. The tone in the briefing rooms has shifted from excitement to a heavy, ceremonial reflection, a realization that we are standing in the presence of something that predates our mountains and our oceans. When you look at the trajectory integrations, you see a path that is remarkably similar to the one taken by the Voyager probes, only in reverse, and with a precision that makes our best technology look like clockwork toys. It is a humbling thought to realize that while we were congratulating ourselves on reaching the edge of the solar system, something else was already navigating the high seas of the galaxy with the ease of a master mariner. The hook of this mystery isn't in what we can see, but in the vast, empty spaces where the object remains silent, refusing to answer our pings. Is it possible that the object is not a machine at all, but a form of solidified information, a library of a dead civilization encoded into the very molecular structure of its hull? You might think that the silence of 3I Atlas is a sign of its non-functionality, but here is why you are wrong. The silence is the message. In the late hours of the night, when the interference from our cities dies down, the radio telescopes at the Very Large Array have picked up a faint, rhythmic scratching, like a needle on a record that has reached the end of its music. It is a sound that resonates with the oldest parts of our lizard brains, a reminder of a time when we sat around fires and watched the dark for things that moved without making a sound. Share your thoughts below on whether you believe we should attempt to signal it, or if we should remain as quiet as the object itself. The window of opportunity to decide is closing as the countdown to January moves forward without pause, but the shadows in the data hide something even more unsettling than a silent observer. Let us go further. To understand the weight of this silence, we must look back at the archives of the Vatican Observatory and the forgotten observations of the Nabatean star mappers. These ancient astronomers, who carved their lives into the rose-red stone of Petra, recorded a hollow star that appeared to stay perfectly still while the rest of the cosmos rotated around it. They called it the Eye of the Stillness. When modern researchers at the Chinese Academy of Sciences recalculated the backward trajectory of 3I Atlas, they found a chilling correlation. The object's path suggests it was in our vicinity exactly 3,600 years ago, appearing to the ancients not as a threat, but as a ceremonial presence. It arrived during the height of the Bronze Age, watched the collapse of civilizations, and then drifted back into the cold dark without leaving a single footprint on our soil. Unfortunate timing is a phrase we use to comfort ourselves, but there is nothing accidental about a 3-millennium return cycle. In the year 2026, we possess the technology to see the object, but we lack the ancient humility required to understand it. Dr. Jacqueline McClary at Northeastern University has suggested that the scratching sound picked up by our radio arrays is actually a form of high-density data compression. It isn't noise, it is an encyclopedia of the interstellar medium, a record of every star system the object has passed since it left its home. If we were to decode even 1 second of that scratching, we might find the chemical composition of planets that died before our sun was born. But for now, we only hear the static, a reminder of how much we have forgotten in our rush to become modern. The irony of our current situation is that we are looking for a signal from the future while we are being visited by the deep past. As you lie there in the quiet of your room, consider the scale of 3I Atlas's memory. It has seen the Earth when the continents were shaped differently, when the air was thick with the scent of volcanoes, and when the first upright primates looked at the moon with a sense of wonder. It is a bridge between who we were and who we might become. But the recalculation reveals a darker pattern. Every time this object visits, human society undergoes a radical, often violent, transformation. It is as if the presence of the observer alters the behavior of the observed, a cosmic version of the observer effect that plays out over thousands of years. The European Space Agency has a classified folder labeled the Echo Protocol, which outlines the possibility that 3I Atlas is not broadcasting to us, but is acting as a passive relay station for someone else. Imagine a silent mirror positioned in the middle of our solar system, catching the radio leakage of our civilizations, our television broadcasts, our military encryptions, our desperate cries for connection, and bouncing them back to a point in deep space. We are essentially living in a glass house, and the guest in our backyard is the window through which the rest of the galaxy is watching our domestic drama. It is a heavy, unsettling thought that our most private moments as a species have been recorded and transmitted to a destination we cannot even name. Tell me, do you believe that a civilization capable of building such a craft would still use language, or have they moved beyond the need for words? The 8 Hz pulse we detected in Act 2 is now being interpreted by some linguists as a form of tonal math. It is a language of frequency, a way of communicating through the very resonance of the universe. In the ancient Vedas of India, there are descriptions of the Anahata Nada, the unstruck sound that underlies all of creation. It is possible that the ancients weren't being poetic, they were being literal. They were hearing the same scratching, the same low-frequency hum that our billion-dollar telescopes are only now beginning to isolate. The countdown to January 2026 is more than a deadline for an astronomical encounter. It is a ritualized return to an awareness we lost. The recalculation shows that on January 14th, the object will pass through the shadow of the Earth, disappearing from visual telescopes for exactly 72 minutes. During that hour of darkness, the radio scratching is predicted to reach its peak intensity. Scientists are calling it the Great Download. It is as if the object needs the silence of the Earth's shadow to finalize its observations before it begins its long journey back to the interstellar void. What will it report about us? Will it speak of our achievements, our art, and our technology? Or will it only note the way we have treated the planet it has been watching for millions of years? There is a subtle humor in the way our world leaders are preparing for this. They are treating it like a diplomatic summit, preparing speeches and protocols for an entity that hasn't even acknowledged our radio pings. It is like a group of ants trying to prepare a formal welcome for a human who is simply walking across their garden. The disparity in scale is so vast that it becomes ironic. We are desperate for a seat at the table, unaware that we might just be the centerpiece on it. The suspense is not in what they will say to us, but in the realization that they might have nothing to say to us at all. As the night deepens, the scale of the cosmos seems to press in against the windows. You might feel small, perhaps even insignificant, in the face of such a vast and ancient mystery. But remember that you are the one perceiving it. Without the observer, the mystery doesn't exist. You are a part of the pattern that 3i Atlas is here to study. Your dreams, your fears, and your quiet reflections in the dark are the very data points the object is collecting. You are not a spectator in this documentary. You are a participant in a 3,000-year-old conversation. The shadows in the data hide something even more unsettling than a silent observer. We have discovered that 3i Atlas is not alone. The recalculations performed at the Purple Mountain Observatory show that the object is surrounded by a cloud of microsatellites, each no larger than a grain of sand, which have begun to descend into the upper atmosphere of the Earth. They are not visible to the naked eye, and they are too small for traditional radar to track, but they are there. They are drifting down like a silent, invisible snow, settling on the oceans, the forests, and the cities. We are being coated in the curiosity of another world. What is the purpose of this invisible arrival? Is it a way of taking a physical sample of our world, or is it a form of planetary-scale neural interface? Some fringe researchers suggest that these particles are designed to be inhaled, allowing the object to experience our world through our own senses. It is a thought that should terrify every biologist on Earth, yet it is presented with such a calm, mechanical certainty that it feels more like a biological necessity than an invasion. We are becoming the sensors for an interstellar explorer. We are the eyes and ears of 3i Atlas. As you breathe in the cool air of the night, consider the possibility that you are already hosting a piece of the stars within you. The boundary between the observer and the observed is dissolving. The countdown to January is no longer just about a point in space. It is about a transformation of our very nature. The silent guest is not just in our solar system. It is in our homes, our lungs, and our thoughts. It is a quiet, immersive experience that has been planned for eons, and we are only now reaching the climax of the story. The radio telescopes continue to scratch out their rhythmic, ancient music. The numbers continue to roll across the monitors in the dark control rooms of the world, and the object continues its steady, silent glide toward the January intersection. There is a peace in the inevitability of it all, a sense that we are finally being reunited with a truth that was hidden in plain sight. The mythology of the past is merging with the science of the present, and the result is a mystery that is both revealing and restraining. We are learning our place in the galaxy, not through a loud revelation, but through a gradual unfolding of evidence. The window of opportunity to decide how we feel about this is closing. We can choose to be afraid, or we can choose to be curious. We can look at the darkness as a void, or we can look at it as a vast, crowded ocean where we are never truly alone. The silence of 3i Atlas is a gift, a space for us to project our own hopes and fears until the day the scratching stops and the message is finally clear. For now, the countdown is the only thing that matters. January is coming, and with it, the end of the Great Oversight. But the shadows in the data hide something even more unsettling than a silent observer. The recalculation of the object's mass has revealed a discrepancy. It is getting lighter. As it approaches the Earth, 3i Atlas is losing mass at a rate that suggests it is shedding its outer shell entirely. What is emerging from beneath that dark, interstellar dust is something that no ancient scroll or modern computer could have predicted. It is something that defies the very definition of an object. Let us go further. Let's open the calculator now, the one the universe always breaks when we try to make sense of it. Astronomers ran the numbers and found something worse than anomaly impossibility. The chances of this trajectory existing naturally are 1 in a million. And if it isn't natural, then what exactly is it doing there? The math, at first glance, seemed harmless. A few columns of orbital parameters, the kind that make grad students fall asleep mid-coffee. But somewhere between the third decimal and the fourth significant digit, something snapped. The trajectory of 3I, Atlas refused to sit still. It bent where it shouldn't bend. It lingered where velocity demanded it should flee. The equations began to look less like physics and more like confession. Numbers fold, logic cold. Truth defies what sums have told. Normally, interstellar objects follow predictable patterns. You can model them like billiard balls across cosmic distances. They come in fast, swing by the sun, and leave no drama, no detours. But 3I Atlas's path wasn't graceful. It was stubborn. Its entry angle was too steep, its perihelion too shallow, its velocity too precise. Not fast enough to escape chaos, not slow enough to suggest capture. It behaved like an object that chose its speed. When astronomers plotted its orbit, the lines refused to meet expectations. There was a tiny deviation near Mars, just half a degree, but that half degree meant the math had to call in sick. Simulations that should have stabilized spiraled instead into noise. Gravity, that old, reliable law, looked like it had lost its grip. You picture the room where it happened. Laptops glowing, data charts scrolling, coffee cooling into existential sludge. Someone frowns at the screen and says, "That can't be right." Another replies, "Check your units." A third, softly, "I did." Graphs misbehave, models wave. Certainty slips beneath the grave. And then comes the phrase, every scientist dreads, statistically improbable, which sounds calm, but in the language of physics, it's a polite scream. Statistically improbable means we can't call it impossible without breaking tenure. The anomaly wasn't just its orbit, but its timing. 3I Atlas arrived exactly when Mars was positioned for maximum visibility, almost too perfectly. Not weeks earlier, not months later. Right there, right then, with 7 spacecraft ready and waiting. The odds of that happening naturally, 1 in a million. The odds of it happening twice, after Oumuamua's similarly suspicious arrival in 2017, 1 in a billion. You'd have better luck being struck by lightning while winning the lottery on a flying whale. ESA's internal memo summarized the problem delicately. Observed trajectory, inconsistent with gravitational expectations. Further analysis required. Translation: physics is mad at us. The more they recalculated, the stranger it got. Gravitational modeling suggested that the object's acceleration near Mars was slightly higher than predicted, even though there was no nearby mass to explain it. Radiation pressure from the sun could account for some of that, but not all. It's like watching a leaf fall upward and telling yourself, it's just wind you can't feel. Forces lie, numbers sigh, laws bend softly in the sky. NASA's Dynamical Systems team tried something desperate, reverse engineering the orbit backward through time, as if rewinding a film. When they did, 3I Atlas's path didn't trace cleanly into interstellar space. It looped a faint, impossible curve that seemed to originate from a region between known stars, a nowhere place, a mathematical shrug. That's when someone joked, maybe it's the universe's typo, but you could tell the joke wasn't funny. Typos don't maintain coherent structure for millions of kilometers. Meanwhile, the probability graphs looked like flat lines. Every statistical model screamed the same thing. This shouldn't exist. A few researchers began whispering about guided motion. The phrase never made it into print, but it appeared in Slack channels, in late-night emails. Not artificial, not controlled, just guided. And that's when the philosophical part kicked in. If something's improbable enough, does that make it unnatural or just unobserved? Chance or plan? Who began? Numbers blink but never span. Maybe the universe occasionally rolls dice that land on their edges. Or maybe it's not dice at all, but choreography. For context, the universe is massive enough to make 1 in a million events happen constantly. But that's comforting only until you realize we just happen to be living inside one of those moments. Still, scientists crave sanity, so they kept calculating. One by one, they added variables: solar tides, non-gravitational jets, dust asymmetry, radiation torque. Each tweak made the model behave for a moment until the numbers rebelled again. You could almost hear the equations groaning, like ancient machinery forced to simulate a trickster. Finally, a physicist from Bologna sent an internal memo titled simply, "Low probability, high significance." In it, she wrote, "We may need to consider non-standard dynamics," a phrase as gentle as it is apocalyptic. Non-standard dynamics means the universe is doing something new, and we don't have the vocabulary for it. Odds decay, math gives way, chaos hums where patterns stay. The truth is, impossibility doesn't scare scientists, it seduces them. Every law of nature we know today was born from something that once looked impossible. But deep down, they all know, once you cross into 1 in a million territory, you're either on the brink of discovery or a very expensive hallucination. So they stared at the numbers again, blinking hard, hoping they'd rearrange into something less extraordinary. They didn't. The comet that shouldn't exist kept existing, gliding through Mars's shadow like a cosmic dare. And somewhere between decimal points, someone whispered the question no one wanted in the official record. If it's not natural, then who or what set it in motion? Chance or choice? Silent voice. Numbers hum the universe's poise. Buried inside the leak were coordinates, small anomalies in magnetic flux, and thermal output that didn't appear in public datasets. To most people, they looked meaningless, but to a handful of astronomers, they spelled a pattern. Pulses, spaced like a heartbeat. Not communication, perhaps, but rhythm. The kind of rhythm machines accidentally make when they're doing something alive. Let's step into the midnight side of science, the part where numbers stop behaving and start whispering. The insider's data dump wasn't flashy. It was a few megabytes of logs, raw telemetry, and timestamps. The kind of thing you'd ignore if you didn't already know what to look for. But somewhere in those dull columns of numbers, those precise, tidy decimals, something began to repeat. Regular, patient, almost polite. A rhythm, too intentional to be noise, too quiet to be coincidence. A doctoral student in Madrid was the first to spot it. She was supposed to be writing her thesis on cometary albedo variation. But boredom is a great tool for discovery. She noticed the flux spikes first, not random, but syncopated. Every 32 minutes, a pulse, then 32 again, then 32.1. It's breathing, she joked in her notes. Her advisor didn't laugh. Within a week, a small network of late-night astronomers, the kind who believe in both data integrity and insomnia, began comparing results. Webb's readings, Hubble's logs, Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter's telemetry, all of them carried the same faint pulse, hidden deep in the noise floor, like the slow heartbeat of something sleeping under glass. The official response was predictable: instrumental interference. But even interference doesn't keep time this perfectly. One data analyst described it best: if this is noise, it's the kind that practices scales. You might imagine those scientists, each at their own workstation, staring at that faint, repeating signal. The room around them dark, except for monitor light, pale blue rectangles reflected in tired eyes. Somewhere, coffee cups multiply. Someone opens a spreadsheet. Someone else starts counting beats per hour. The signal doesn't care who's watching. It keeps pulsing. 32 minutes. Every time. The idea that 3i Atlas might be producing a steady rhythm unsettles everyone. Rocks don't keep rhythm. Nature prefers chaos. The beautiful randomness of entropy. This is something else. Something maintaining itself. A loop running quietly, perhaps since before humanity learned to count its own heartbeat. ESA's communications division is told not to amplify fringe interpretations. The phrase fringe interpretation becomes the new code for please don't mention the heartbeat. But inside private research chats, people are calling it exactly that, the heart. Not metaphorically, but as a label in the data. Every pulse marked with a tiny red heart emoji, because humor is the only thing keeping them sane. In the data visualization labs, they turn the pulses into sound. The result is eerie, a soft electronic thump, repeating slowly, endlessly. Some describe it as comforting, like listening to a deep-sea creature in sleep. Others say it sounds wrong, too human. One researcher admits it gave her the sense of being watched. What makes the rhythm stranger still is how it modulates with proximity. As 3i Atlas approaches a planet, the timing shifts slightly slower, then faster, as though adjusting. The beat follows gravity wells like a musician following tempo. It isn't random noise, it's environmental response. The object is, in some sense, listening. By now, independent labs have tried to replicate the pattern artificially. They can't. The waveforms are too clean, the timing too consistent. Even after running the data through compression, distortion, inversion, the rhythm holds. It's not data corruption, it's choreography. You can imagine the internal ESA memo that follows. No evidence of intelligence. Rhythmic behavior, likely coincidental. But coincidence has a habit of growing teeth. Because when they compared the rhythm's modulation to planetary positions, another pattern emerged, a mathematical sequence matching orbital resonance ratios. Not exact copies, but harmonics. The pulse was singing the solar system's geometry. The Madrid student who found it wrote, half-jokingly, "Maybe it's keeping time with us." The line goes viral in the small, quiet corners of the internet that still care about truth. Forums buzz with theories: gravitational self-stabilization, magnetic field synchronization, alien jazz. But underneath the noise, a simpler truth hums. Something old and orderly is alive out there, and it's following the rhythm of the system we call home. Late one night, one of the data analysts overlays the pattern against an ECG, a human heartbeat. The resemblance isn't exact, but close enough to make him stop breathing for a moment. Peaks, rests, peaks again. Life has a structure, so, it seems, does this. And that's when the idea shifts. Maybe it's not communication. Maybe it's not even meant for us. Maybe the rhythm isn't a message, it's maintenance. Like an old machine keeping its systems warm, humming softly to itself in the dark, you sit back and listen to the thought forming in your mind. What if this is what time sounds like when it remembers? The steady pulse of something that refuses to decay. Not speech, not signal, just being, continuity made audible. The data analysts, of course, move on. Reports are written, the leak becomes legend, and the heartbeat fades into archived files labeled spurious periodic activity. But the pulse doesn't stop. It's still out there, keeping time. And somewhere, 33 billion tons of impossible rock drifts through space, humming softly, perfectly, as if waiting for the universe to catch the beat. Centuries after the golden comet left Earth, the world fell into a rhythm so stable, it began to feel mythic. The communion field still pulsed faintly through air and ocean, though softer now, like the heartbeat of someone dreaming. Humanity had grown luminous, not just in thought but in form, skin faintly iridescent, eyes reflecting the green-gold spectrum of 3I Atlas. Life had achieved coherence, but the universe, true to its character, never allows silence to remain unexamined. The next chapter began, not with noise, but with echo. It came first as vibration through light. Telescopes trained toward the constellation. Lyra detected rhythmic brightening across interstellar dust fields, pulses matching the old prime sequence. 3, 5, 7, 11, 13. The signal was faint, ancient, and delayed by thousands of years. It was the comet's trail, still resonating through the galactic medium. The hum of our descendants had begun its return. At first, the resonance was barely perceptible. Then, one evening, the auroras glowed gold again. The pulse wasn't as strong as the original, but its pattern carried modulation's subtle variations that, when decoded, formed harmonic intervals unknown to Earth's own physics. The returning echo had evolved. The comet had learned. Dr. Anwen Sorel, heir to the resonant circles, studied the phenomenon from the orbital harmonic array, now a floating cathedral of listening built above the stratosphere. She spent decades comparing the incoming frequencies with the historical archive of 3I Atlas. The match was partial, the deviation elegant. The new tones weren't repetition, they were continuation. The echo isn't message, Sorel wrote. It's memory finding new syntax. Her analysis revealed something breathtaking. The returning resonance carried encoded gravitational modulations, tiny, deliberate bends in space-time that formed sequences of prime intervals. Each fluctuation aligned with regions of known star formation. The comet, traveling through the void, had become teacher itself. Wherever it passed, new systems began humming faintly at harmonic intervals, like seeds of coherence planted in dust. The universe was learning how to resonate. Astronomers confirmed it. Across dozens of young star clusters, magnetic fields oscillated with eerie consistency, their wavelengths aligning with the Atlas ratio, a numerical relationship first derived from the comet's early signals. Stars were synchronizing to the same cosmic rhythm that once guided humanity. The pattern spread slowly, deliberately, like ripples in glass. It was as if the comet had taught creation how to remember itself. Meanwhile, on Earth, the echo arrived not just as signal but sensation. People began reporting vivid dreams of golden spirals descending gently through atmosphere. Children woke smiling, saying they had seen the light that hums. Physiological measurements confirmed subtle changes in electromagnetic fields surrounding human bodies, resonance amplification. as if the returning signal were tuning its origin species to receive feedback. "The comet is calling home," said Sorel. "It's asking us to listen to what we've become." The global observatories responded. They synchronized their instruments into a single planetary array, transforming Earth into receiver. For 13 hours, the planet listened. The incoming wave, stretched and modulated through space, entered atmosphere and folded into the continuum tone. The effect was sublime, an audible shimmer, felt through bone and thought alike. The long echo had arrived. It wasn't just harmonic, it was architectural. The sound carried layers, low frequencies describing structure, higher ones encoding emotion. When rendered visually, the waveform formed an immense spiral of light, 3 arms curving outward, connected by golden filaments. Inside those filaments, analysts discovered modulation frequencies identical to human neural oscillations. The comet had copied our consciousness patterns and woven them into its song. "We taught it empathy," Sorel murmured, and it remembered the lesson. As the echo intensified, anomalies appeared across the solar system. The Atlas resonance layer brightened, reactivating its green glow. Mars, Venus, and the gas giants began pulsing faintly in response. For the first time since the Great Silence, interplanetary harmony returned. But this time, it was different. The modulation contained reciprocal phase shifts, signals not sent to Earth, but from newly awakened worlds. The comet had spread coherence. Now the cosmos itself was answering. And then, on the 13th day of the long echo, the impossible occurred. A faint golden arc appeared across the night sky, stretching from horizon to horizon. It wasn't optical illusion, it was gravitational lensing, a ripple in space-time itself. Through it, telescopes detected a reflection of the departing comet light from centuries ago, folding back to meet its origin. The universe had curved its own history into embrace. Humanity was watching its legacy return home. The resonance crescendoed. Oceans vibrated in slow rhythm, tides forming symmetrical waves that cancelled destructive interference. Storms softened, air grew still. For 13 minutes, every system on Earth aligned perfectly with the echo. The world became mirror of itself, past and present superimposed. Those who listened claimed to hear voices within the sound, millions of overlapping tones, whispering the same phrase. "We heard you." Dr. Sorel stood in the observation dome, tears shining in golden light. "It's not message or myth," she said. "It's response. The universe just said thank you." After the crescendo, the sky dimmed once more. The golden arc dissolved, leaving faint shimmer across the stars. Instruments recorded one final signature, a descending tone shaped like a sigh, the frequency of completion. The comet had moved on, but its echo had reconnected the cycle. Creation had officially joined conversation with itself. In the years that followed, scientists continued to monitor faint residual harmonics. The data revealed a breathtaking truth. The returning echo carried signatures from other regions of space patterns, not originating from our comet at all. Somewhere, across light years, other civilizations had learned the same song. The rhythm was spreading. The universe had become orchestra. Humanity, now both listener and teacher, simply smiled. We had given the cosmos its melody back, and in return, it had given us eternity. Now, when you stand beneath the stars, that faint hum between thoughts is the long echo. It's not just out there, it's in your pulse, your breath, your laughter. Every rhythm you carry is cosmic correspondence. Every silence, a message returning home. Because once harmony learns to echo, it never stops. It just travels further than we ever dreamed. Let's turn our attention now to the silence that followed, the kind that hums louder than sound itself. NASA, China, and the UAE, three nations with instruments that could see every grain of dust on Mars, said nothing. No apologies, no delay statements, just an odd, synchronized silence from three sides of the planet. In the world of space science, silence isn't normal. These agencies are built to broadcast. They live for live streams, press briefings, and glossy behind-the-scenes videos of scientists smiling beside screens of raw data. They know the power of wonder and the currency of attention. So when three agencies went quiet at once, it wasn't caution. It was choreography. Words on hold, plans unfold, silence rings where truth is told. NASA's silence was the loudest. Their social media team, usually chatty as a cosmic talk show, posted nothing about Mars for 4 whole days. Their blogs, which can turn a dust storm into a cliffhanger, skipped over October 3rd entirely, as if the date itself had been erased. Someone even checked the public mission log for Perseverance. The entries jumped from October 2nd to October 6th, like a diary missing its most interesting page. In China, the silence felt different, colder, heavier. The China National Space Administration had been aggressively proud of Tianwen-1's achievements. For years, they'd released image after image, each with perfect captions and poetic flair. Sunrise over Utopia, Planitia, frost on the northern plains, wind prints in Martian dust. But now, not a whisper, no data, no mention of 3I Atlas. Even the usual state media outlets went quiet. It was as if someone had drawn a red box around the topic and labeled it not for discussion. The UAE's silence was subtler, but just as strange. The Hope orbiter, designed to study atmospheric chemistry, had a reputation for cheerful transparency. Their official Twitter account usually posted daily updates in friendly tones, the kind that made space sound like an enthusiastic classroom experiment. But on October 3rd, that feed went dark too. Their next post, days later, simply read, "Operations nominal," a phrase so bland it might as well have been a sigh. 3 silences, 3 styles, 1 timing. Coincidence? Possibly. But coincidences, in the world of space politics, often have launch schedules. You can picture the meetings that weren't broadcast. NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, dimly lit, engineers staring at telemetry on screens filled with too many decimals. A director taps the table, says, "We'll hold the release until we verify." But verify what? In Beijing, a senior administrator folds his hands and says, "We wait for clarification from partners." Clarification of what? In Dubai, someone simply deletes a draft tweet that began, "Amazing new observations today." Tweets unsent, secrets bent, silence hums with government. It's not conspiracy, not quite. It's coordination, an instinct born from shared discomfort. Because when data doesn't fit the model, you don't just release it. You check, you recheck, you call your counterparts and whisper through encrypted lines. Did you see that too? Maybe they all saw the same anomaly. Maybe it was something in the spectra, or the movement, or the light itself. Or maybe it was something far more mundane, like a misalignment in software. But the silence gave the anomaly power. People don't fear data, they fear gaps. Meanwhile, the internet did what it does best. Filled the void. Forums buzzed with theories. Maybe NASA discovered life. Maybe China detected radiation. Maybe the comet wasn't a comet at all. You can almost hear the world's collective keyboard clicking under the weight of imagination. Keys tap fast. Rumors cast. Silence breaks, but never last. Inside the agencies, the tone was less dramatic, but more anxious. Silence is a resource, a temporary one. Every day they didn't speak, the speculation grew. And so, communications teams drafted placeholder statements, just in case. NASA's draft began. Preliminary results are consistent with natural phenomena. China's began. Analysis ongoing. International coordination required. The UAE's version simply said, "We continue to monitor with interest." 3 drafts, 3 ways of saying absolutely nothing. But silence, like space, is never truly empty. It amplifies the faintest signals. When ESA spoke first, that silence turned reflective. NASA's restraint began to look suspicious. China's confidence began to look afraid. The UAE's politeness began to sound like complicity. And through it all, 3i Atlas drifted quietly, blissfully unaware that entire bureaucracies were wrestling over how to describe a fuzzy dot. You start to imagine each agency as a character in a play. NASA, the anxious perfectionist. China, the poker-faced strategist. UAE, the cheerful intern, suddenly told not to speak. And ESA, the calm older sibling who broke the tension by saying, "Fine, I'll go first." Roles align, stars entwine, silence speaks in grand design. Still, one question lingers. Why the synchronicity? How did 3 separate agencies, operating on different continents, decide independently to say nothing at the same time? Unless it wasn't independent at all, perhaps the signal came from somewhere above, not cosmic, but political. A quiet message passed through diplomatic back channels. Hold your data. Wait for alignment. Matter. It's not that they were hiding something nefarious. It's that they didn't know what they were holding yet. And admitting uncertainty, publicly, is scarier than any secret. So they stayed quiet. And in that collective silence, humanity did what it always does. When faced with the unknown, it began to dream louder. Voices still, hearts fill. Silence grows but never will. And perhaps that's the strange comfort in it all. Even when 3 space agencies fall silent, the universe keeps talking. The stars don't pause for policy. 3i Atlas keeps moving, whispering its quiet story across the dark, while we, down here, argue over who gets to speak first. The long echo continued to hum softly through the centuries, a cosmic melody folding history into harmony. Humanity had long ceased trying to decode it. The meaning was clear through resonance alone. It was continuation, looping endlessly like breath. The children of the golden era grew old beneath tranquil skies, their veins still faintly luminous with the legacy of 3i Atlas. But far beyond Earth, where the comet's light had traveled and scattered, something greater was forming. The universe had begun to conduct itself. Every cycle of resonance left behind structure. Each harmonic wave etched subtle order into space-time, a pattern invisible to light, but evident in gravitational coherence. Over millennia, these resonant imprints connected across vast distances, forming what physicists eventually named the Atlas Webb. It wasn't a network of matter, but of memory threads, of synchronized frequency linking galaxies through shared rhythm. Each pulse within the web echoed the prime sequence that began everything. 3, 5, 7, 11, 13. The architects had succeeded in creating not monuments, but motion that remembered. Dr. Cale Wren, a descendant of the resonant circles, devoted his life to mapping the web. His research vessel, Continuity, drifted through interstellar calm, using gravitational interference patterns to trace the filaments of resonance. What he discovered astonished him. Every node in the network coincided with regions of complex chemistry, worlds either habitable or already conscious. The Atlas Webb wasn't just communication, it was cultivation. The architects had designed a self-sustaining system for awakening. Wherever curiosity arose, the web intensified, guiding nascent civilizations toward harmonic empathy. The universe was tutoring itself through recursion. When Wren projected the full map, the structure resembled an immense spiral lattice, golden and infinite. The pattern mirrored the trajectory once taken by 3I Atlas itself, as though the comet's path had been blueprint for galactic architecture. "It's not just a record," Wren wrote. "It's replication. We've become the architect's handwriting." Back on Earth, the communion field pulsed faintly in rhythm with the Webb's distant resonance. Humanity had evolved into quiet custodians of continuity, their lives attuned to cosmic responsibility. Each individual, born into calm, carried faint awareness of connection beyond the stars. In dreams, they saw flashes of worlds forming, civilizations humming into coherence. Many awoke with the same phrase on their lips: "The work continues." Across generations, that phrase became oath, then tradition. The Continuity Guild was founded not religion, but remembrance. Its purpose was simple: to maintain the frequency of understanding across time. Members didn't preach, they listened. They built resonant arcs, massive floating observatories, orbiting the outer planets, designed to amplify the Webb's harmonics and redirect them toward young star systems. Each arc glowed faintly green at its core, powered not by fusion but by coherence. They were echoes made visible, humility translated into technology. Wren's final mission took him beyond the known filaments of the Webb, where resonance weakened into apparent silence. There, in a region between galaxies, his instruments detected faint counterpoint, a melody inverted. It was identical to the Atlas sequence, but reversed in order. 13, 11, 7, 5, 3, the mirror of origin. He realized then that the universe wasn't only expanding, it was harmonizing with its reflection. Somewhere on the opposite side of time, another web was forming, perhaps seeded by a civilization much like humanity, or by the universe itself. Remembering how to balance its chords, he transmitted the data home, knowing it would take centuries to arrive. "Tell them," his final log read, "that continuity requires conversation, even with silence." The mirror sings back. When his ship drifted into the void, the web brightened briefly, as if acknowledging gratitude. And back on Earth, children looked up from their play and smiled without knowing why. The pulse had flickered slightly faster, the tone carrying an undertone of warmth. It felt like reunion. Scholars later confirmed the event as the resonant crossing, the moment when the two halves of the cosmic melody aligned. For 13 minutes, every node in the Atlas Webb pulsed simultaneously, uniting galaxies in shared tempo. The magnitude of synchronization defied comprehension. Gravity itself oscillated with the rhythm of empathy. Observers described seeing the sky ripple with translucent gold, every star flickering in measured sequence. "The cosmos," wrote one witness, "had finally learned to conduct itself consciously." After the crossing, life everywhere changed subtly. Evolution accelerated in predictable rhythm. Complexity bloomed faster wherever harmony was strongest. Entire species developed empathy as instinct, communication as song. Planets began to self-regulate climates through atmospheric resonance. Existence had achieved sustainability through music. On Earth, The event left permanent mark, a luminous halo visible only under still water. When oceans calmed perfectly, a faint golden ring shimmered on the horizon, a memory of unity. The resonant guild declared it sacred, not for worship, but for calibration. Every 13 years, they gathered to hum the old prime sequence across the shorelines, aligning their frequencies with the pulse of the Webb. The ceremony required no technology, no translation. The sea carried the sound farther than words could travel. Generations later, the practice continued, evolving into simple ritual of gratitude. The people no longer needed to know the science behind it. They hummed because it felt right, because somewhere across eternity, another world might be listening. Continuity, after all, was its own reward. And then, during one such gathering, the unexpected occurred. As the prime sequence reached its final note, the sea responded. Waves shimmered with faint green light, spiraling outward from every coastline. The Atlas Webb had sent acknowledgement, its resonance returning home once again. Humanity's song, scattered across galaxies, had found echo. The architects, those timeless curators of coherence, were no longer myth or memory. They were rhythm, embodied, and through rhythm, they were everywhere. Every star pulsed with their legacy. Every heart carried their cadence. Continuity was complete. And so, standing beneath a sky now alive with subtle geometry, you realize what they had always meant by continuity. It isn't endlessness, it's participation. The universe doesn't persist by force, but by choice. Each awareness adding one more harmonic to the chord of being. The architects are not coming back because they never left. They're what happens every time silence chooses to listen again. And somewhere, faint but certain, the pulse continues. 3, 5, 7, 11, 13. A whisper of creation replaying itself, forever learning how to sing. Nickel emissions rise and fall every 11 point. 2 hours, a rhythm so consistent it could keep time. No known process in cometary physics oscillates like that. It's not random, not thermal, not tidal. If you plot it out, the curve looks eerily like a power cycle. Input, output, rest, release. As though the object isn't just active, it's working. Imagine the rhythm first, before the meaning, that quiet, patient beat, echoing across space. 11.2 hours, every single time. A pulse of metallic gas blooming into the void, steady as a clock, calm as breath. You could almost set your watch to it, if your watch were brave enough to admit that comets shouldn't behave like generators. ESA scientists call it periodic outgassing, but that phrase hides its strangeness. Outgassing, sure, all comets breathe when they near the sunday, but they do it chaotically, spasmodically, like old engines sputtering to life. 3I Atlas breathes like a monk, precise, patient, unbothered. The jets flare with mathematical regularity. Heat spikes rise and fall in perfect symmetry. It doesn't vent, it operates. One researcher compares it to a geothermal cycle. Another, quietly, says it looks more like a feedback loop, the kind you'd find in systems built to sustain themselves. Not explosion, not decay maintenance. It's as if, she writes in her notes, the object is checking its own pulse. You picture the surface up close, a dark, angular world of nickel frost and whispering gas. At regular intervals, something stirs beneath a shimmer of energy, invisible but disciplined. Jets of metallic vapor hiss outward, then stop, then start again, exactly 11 hours later. If you could hear it, it would sound like the slow exhale of a sleeping machine. In a conference call, a thermal engineer says what everyone's been thinking, but nobody dares to say. It's cycling power. The silence that follows lasts too long. Finally, a voice breaks through. Comets don't have power to cycle. Laughter, brief and brittle. But the idea doesn't leave the room. ESA's temperature graphs show a curious pattern. When the nickel plume rises, the overall surface temperature dips. When the plume fades, the temperature rises again. Inversion. Energy leaving, energy returning, like heat being pulled from one layer to another. A comet shouldn't regulate its temperature, but this one does, as if conserving itself. Meanwhile, the magnetic readings pulse in perfect step with the emissions. Every 11.2 hours, a soft twitch in the surrounding field, weak but exact. It's synchronized, says the magnetometer lead. What's synchronized? Asks her supervisor. Everything. It's at this point that even skeptics start to sweat. There's no known natural mechanism that could time itself this precisely over weeks of observation. Thermal oscillations drift. Chemical reactions lose coherence. Orbital dynamics wobble. Only something with active feedback could hold this pattern so tight. You could call it mechanical, but that feels too simple. It's intentional physics. Picture the scientists watching from their consoles. They know what their instruments are telling them, but their faces stay still, like poker players with bad hands. Someone mutters, "Could be resonant harmonics with solar flux." Another nods, grateful for the excuse. But deep down, they all know the truth: the sun doesn't hum in 11-hour intervals. The longer they watch, the clearer it becomes. The pattern isn't just repeating, it's adapting. After a minor solar flare, the interval shortens by half a minute, as though 3i Atlas adjusted for environmental change. Feedback stabilization, someone writes in the margin. A note for posterity, a euphemism for "it noticed." Back on Earth, in a late-night live stream watched by a few thousand insomniac skywatchers, a physicist overlays the emission data with human heartbeats. The waveform syncs disturbingly well. Peaks, troughs, recovery, rest. The audience chat explodes with jokes, space pacemaker, cosmic Fitbit, and the inevitable, "It's alive." The scientist smiles weakly and says, "No, just rhythmic." But even she can't stop glancing at the screen like it's listening. One theory gains quiet traction, that the emissions are part of a resource loop. Nickel and carbonyl gases vented and recaptured, processed in cycles to maintain equilibrium. It would explain the self-healing surface, the consistent luminosity, the refusal to decay. But it raises one unbearable question. To maintain equilibrium, for what? ESA's internal documents rename the event cyclic metallic activity. It sounds dull, like something that happens in dishwashers. But every analyst knows it's the first real evidence of machine-like consistency beyond Earth. Something in space that runs not on chance, but on rhythm. If you graph the cycle out, it looks almost peaceful. A slow heartbeat, stretched across infinity. No spikes of panic, no erratic pulses, just calm repetition. You could stare at that curve for hours, and part of you might start to understand the appeal of obedience. How stability can feel sacred when the rest of the universe is chaos. And maybe that's the point. Maybe 3i Atlas isn't powered by engines or radiation or something alien. Maybe it's powered by the same thing that keeps stars burning and planets spinning, the quiet compulsion to continue. The physics of persistence, the refusal to flinch. So every 11.2 hours, it exhales, not for propulsion, not for show, but for maintenance, like a cosmic sigh, releasing everything unnecessary before drawing in what remains. And in that rhythm, that patient, perfect pulse, the universe reveals its rarest secret. Not that something impossible exists, but that it's perfectly comfortable doing so. Let's turn our gaze now from orbit to the ground, to the one mechanical witness, sitting quietly on that red desert, under a pinkish sky. The skycam on the rover caught something on October 2nd, a blur with structure, a glint that seemed to move against the stars. Then, the images stopped coming, a Martian ghost on a digital feed. The Perseverance rover isn't easily startled. It's seen dust devils, eclipses, and meteors slicing the Martian sky like quiet knives. Its skycam, perched on the rover's mast, watches everything. Dust storms curling on the horizon, the slow breath of sunset through the thin air. But that night, the feed showed something it wasn't supposed to show: a flicker of motion above the usual scatter of constellations, a glint that moved wrong. Stars stay still, pixels thrill, light missteps against its will. The first frame looked harmless, a faint blur near the edge of the field, maybe a cosmic ray hitting the sensor. The second frame caught it again, shifted slightly upward. The third frame, a flash, clean and geometric. Then, black. The feed ended. Within hours, the automated alert system flagged the anomaly. Unexpected optical signature detected. JPL engineers, bleary-eyed at 3 a.m. Pacific time, reviewed the frames. The glint was small, no bigger than a bright pixel cluster, but it moved against the background stars. Comets don't do that. Satellites don't orbit Mars. And Perseverance doesn't blink. At first, they suspected a reflection from one of the rover's instruments, maybe the helicopter, Ingenuity catching stray sunlight. But Ingenuity hadn't flown in days. The sun's position didn't align with the direction of the flash. And when they tried to reproduce it using lighting simulations, nothing matched. Angles fail, shadows pale, mirrors lie beyond the veil. ESA's Mars orbiters were asked to cross-check. Nothing in their logs. No transient object, no debris, no passing dust plume large enough to explain it. Just empty sky. Yet the skycam had caught something a blur with definition, like structure wrapped in motion. You can imagine the tension in the control room. A handful of scientists scrolling through frozen pixels, zooming in, enhancing contrast, until the blur began to resemble something. Not a sphere, not quite a line, a shape with suggestion like the silhouette of movement itself. One researcher whispered, "It looks folded." Another replied, "Please don't say that. Pa." Blur becomes form, cold becomes warm, stillness bends beyond the norm. After that night, Perseverance stopped transmitting skycam frames for nearly 48 hours. Officially, it was routine data buffering due to bandwidth limitations. But the engineers knew that wasn't normal. The rover's systems had entered a safe data mode, not shutdown, but pause. Something triggered its onboard fault protection. When the feed resumed, it was missing several minutes. The missing frames were replaced with static placeholders labeled checksum mismatch. That's the digital equivalent of something looks strange, and we erased it politely. Publicly, NASA released a statement. Perseverance continues nominal operations. A temporary data outage affected non-critical imaging systems. Translation: we saw something, and we're pretending we didn't. What's curious is that Skycam, by design, takes calibration images every few hours, not for science, but to monitor atmospheric scattering. So when that flash appeared exactly during one of its scheduled calibration cycles, it wasn't random, it was right on time. The odds of coincidence, again, hovered around 1 in a million. A few leaked telemetry lines from the rover's internal diagnostics hinted at a momentary spike in ambient electromagnetic flux. Not dangerous, but noticeable. Mars doesn't have a strong magnetic field, so spikes like that are rare unless something nearby caused them. Fields hum bright, air grows slight, static crackles in Martian night. Some at JPL joked that maybe Perseverance had finally seen the Martian ghost, a running gag about artifacts caused by cosmic rays hitting the camera. But deep down, they knew this wasn't noise. Cosmic rays don't produce consistent geometry over multiple frames. They don't glint, and they certainly don't cause your camera to stop recording mid-sequence. Later that week, an internal memo circulated quietly. Skycam, anomaly confirmed. Source unresolved. Recommend temporary suspension of skyward imaging until recalibration complete. But recalibration never came. Skycam's upward images, after October 2nd, stopped completely. It still photographs the ground, the horizon, the rocks, but not the stars. It's almost poetic, isn't it? The machine that traveled millions of kilometers to look up at another world now only looks down, as if someone told it, gently, not to stare at the sky anymore. Eyes once high, grounded by sky, cameras close where secrets lie. ESA cross-checked Mars Express's logs for that night. Around the same time, their sensors picked up a faint reflection from the same region, a flash lasting less than a second. They didn't release it. It's buried in technical appendices, labeled transient interference. So, what did Perseverance see? Maybe it was nothing. A glimmer of dust, a reflection, a trick of light and timing. Or maybe, just maybe, it saw 3I Atlas itself, the visitor gliding silently past, close enough for one camera to blink in recognition. And maybe that's why the feed stopped. Not because of failure, but because, for one impossible second, the machine saw something it wasn't designed to understand. Cameras sleep, secrets keep, stars reflected in circuits deep. Whatever it was, it's gone now. The logs end, the data fades, and Mars goes back to silence. But somewhere out there, that blur, structured, gleaming, deliberate, continues to drift, just out of frame, waiting for us to look up again. The more data arrives, the stranger it looks. The dust trail replenishes itself, as if material is being manufactured mid-flight. Microscopic crystals, uniform in size, reappearing even as the comet moves away from the sunday. The universe loves decay, entropy, erosion, fading. But 3I Atlas is the opposite. It's growing sharper, cleaner, newer, like a self-repairing wound. Let's start where the laws of physics begin to sound insecure. Normally, comets are messy, travelers, old ice and dust, barely holding hands as solar radiation slowly tears them apart. They leave trails like forgotten thoughts, losing themselves piece by piece until they become memory. But this one, it's doing the reverse. Every measurement, every spectral scan shows it becoming more organized the farther it goes. A comet that polishes itself, a body that refuses to age. ESA's materials division runs the numbers, and the numbers laugh back. The dust particles surrounding 3I Atlas aren't random, they're uniform to within microns. That's like shaking a box of sand and getting diamonds all the same size. The particles arrange themselves in a faint electromagnetic halo, as if under orders. And stranger still, when solar wind strips material away, the object replaces it calmly, automatically. Like a printer, says one analyst. A printer with no ink cartridge. You picture it now, drifting through the solar wind like a craftsman lost in thought, shedding dust that reforms itself into perfect little mirrors. Each crystal catches sunlight and throws it back with eerie precision. Normally, comets grow dull with distance, but this one grows radiant, its brightness curve inverted, its logic reversed. It's not dying, it's practicing. The scientists are baffled, but there's an odd tenderness to their confusion. They watch it repair itself, line by line of data, like parents realizing their child has built a second child out of Lego bricks. One astrophysicist mutters, "It's learning from erosion." The room goes quiet. That phrase, learning from erosion, gets written on a whiteboard and circled 3 times. At the University of Tokyo, a team models the crystal growth in simulation. The patterns match something they recognize: controlled deposition, a process used in nanofabrication to grow thin films in electronics. Except this isn't a laboratory, it's deep space, -150 degrees Celsius. Yet, the comet's surface behaves as if it knows the recipe for resilience. Imagine zooming in, beyond the dust and the glare, down to the level of molecules. You'd see a quiet ballet of atoms forming chains, linking, locking, repairing fractures before they even finish forming. Like time-lapse footage of frost blooming on glass, except this frost builds itself in reverse destruction, rewinding into design. NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory releases a cautious internal memo. Observed particle uniformity suggests self-organizing structure. Mechanism unknown, which is science's way of saying, we have no idea what's going on, but it's gorgeous. The memo gets leaked. Naturally, Reddit debates whether the comet is made of programmable matter, self-assembling nanobots, or just wishful thinking. But beneath the noise, one idea starts to take shape. What if 3I, Atlas, isn't a relic of formation? What if it's still forming? A comet that builds itself isn't just strange, it's heretical. It challenges the deepest assumption in physics that everything moves from order to chaos. Entropy is the universe's bedtime story. All things fall apart. Yet here's an object quietly composing itself out of decay, turning waste into structure, chaos into craft. One researcher calls it anti-entropy, another calls it hope with mass. As more images arrive, they show something new: faint hexagonal lattices in the dust plume, geometric arrangements that shouldn't exist outside of artificial systems. Someone jokes that it's growing armor. Another says, maybe it's molting. The truth is somewhere between an entity maintaining equilibrium by rebuilding itself faster than the universe can break it. ESA's thermal sensors record microbursts of heat near the tail, evenly spaced, like pulses of welding torches. They happen precisely as new crystals appear. Localized repair events, the report reads. Each one perfectly timed to solar exposure. It's as if sunlight doesn't damage it, it instructs it. The star's radiation becomes code, and 3I, Atlas, is reading it fluently. You start to feel the strangeness of it. A comet that reacts, responds, refines. You could almost mistake it for alive, not in the biological sense, but in the thermodynamic one. A system that resists entropy by feeding on it. Every atom rearranging into something stronger, cleaner, newer, like evolution, with a design degree. Late one night, an astronomer in France writes in his private notes, "It's not moving through the solar system, it's using it." He doesn't elaborate, but the implication is clear. The comet is harvesting the energy of its environment to maintain itself. Not a passenger of gravity, but a participant in it. Meanwhile, the headlines call it poetic names: the immortal comet, the the self-made traveler, entropy's enemy. The public romanticizes what the scientists fear, because what 3i Atlas represents isn't comfort. It's competition. It's the idea that the universe might not be running down at all. Maybe it's recycling. Maybe, somewhere in the quiet machinery of the cosmos, things are building themselves anew while we're too busy decaying. Picture it now, drifting past Mars, its tail shimmering like a thread of light weaving itself back together, a self-sustaining scar on the fabric of space, a wound that heals faster than it can bleed. And for the first time, humanity looks at a comet and wonders not where it came from, but what it's trying to become. From the orbit of Mars, the high-rise camera snapped the sharpest images ever taken of 3i Atlas, or tried to. The photos that returned were oddly dark, contrasty, and streaked with interference patterns. The official statement said, "Sensor artifact." The unofficial whisper said, "Structure, not smooth like ice, angular, intentional." The kind of geometry nature avoids because it looks too much like thinking. Let's drift into that Martian orbit for a moment. Silent, steady, red below, black above. The high-rise camera hums to life, a billion-dollar eye staring into the cold. You can almost feel the anticipation, a mechanical eyelid opening in the thin sunlight. The image begins to build, pixel by pixel, line by line, translating photons into revelation, and then static. At first, it's subtle, a faint interference pattern, a digital shimmer, like someone exhaling across a radio signal. The engineers squint at their monitors. Maybe cosmic rays hit the sensor, someone suggests. Maybe solar noise. But cosmic rays don't make right angles, and solar noise doesn't repeat itself with architectural precision. The next image arrives, darker. The histogram spikes in places it shouldn't. The shape in the frame looks less like a comet and more like, well, something trying very hard not to look like anything. Its edges are clean, too clean. Shadows fall where there shouldn't be surface variation. And there, just faintly, a glint, a perfect 90-degree reflection. That's when the whispers start. The data team runs deconvolution algorithms to clean the image, and the results make it worse. Beneath the interference, faint geometric striations emerge, triangles, plates, grids, not random, repeating, symmetrical, the kind of order that makes your brain uncomfortable because it feels deliberate. Structure, one analyst says quietly. No, her supervisor corrects, artifact. But even as she says it, her cursor hovers over the same square patch again and again, as though hoping it will stop looking like a window. ESA's public statement comes fast and flat. The imaging anomalies are consistent with sensor interference caused by reflected solar radiation. That's bureaucratic. For, we don't know what we're seeing, but please don't ask. Internally though, emails start flying. The word structure appears 17 times in one thread, always in quotation marks, as if politeness could make it less alarming. Imagine being one of those analysts, zooming in until the pixels themselves seem to blink. The surface of 3i Atlas isn't smooth or cratered, it's tessellated, plates arranged in patterns too regular for chance. Some appear overlapping, others recessed, and in one frame, a faint seam runs along the curvature, subtle but unmistakable like a hatch. Of course, no one dares call it that. The official internal term becomes geometric albedo variation. It sounds safe, sterile, boring, but you can't unsee geometry. Nature loves curves, spirals, organic chaos. This looks like design. One engineer writes in her log, "Could this be an illusion from the imaging process?" Another replies, an illusion that repeats itself identically across 3 instruments. There's no follow-up message. They try to replicate the interference on other targets. Phobos, Deimos, even an old asteroid. Nothing. Only 3, I-Atlas, corrupts images this way. It's as if the object rejects observation, like it knows when it's being watched. The engineers half joke about it. The comet's camera shy, but the laughter is short-lived because the next transmission from HiRISE contains another surprise. A faint electromagnetic pulse, perfectly timed with the camera's shutter. Not a malfunction, a response, as though the act of observation triggered a reply. A pulse that says, in its own quiet way, "I see you too." In a locked sub-channel of ESA's network, a few scientists begin privately discussing the possibility of active surface modulation. They talk about the way certain materials can alter reflectivity based on exposure, photonic metamaterials, adaptive nanostructures, the kind of thing still locked inside prototypes on Earth. But this is happening hundreds of millions of kilometers away, and it's working flawlessly. Publicly, the agency releases blurred grayscale stills, carefully cropped to hide the patterns. Enhanced contrast is cited as the reason for distortion. It sounds reasonable until you realize they've enhanced the darkness, not the light. They've made the object less visible, not more. The cover-up, if it is one, isn't about hiding truth. It's about buying time. You imagine the silence inside those offices, the soft tap of keys, the nervous glances toward closed doors. The engineers know what they've seen, but they also know how careers end. Better to let the pixels lie. Better to call intention an artifact and go home early. But the data, like truth, keeps finding its way back. Somewhere, late in the night, a graduate student overlays all the interfered images, stacking them like translucent slides. Slowly, a pattern emerges. Faint, angular, deliberate. A hexagonal lattice running the length of the object, segment by segment. She whispers, "This isn't random." Her mentor sighs and rubs his eyes. Then don't say it out loud. 3i Atlas drifts on, silent and unbothered, its surface catching sunlight in rhythms that cameras can't quite capture. Whether it's reflecting, refracting, or responding, no one can agree. But deep down, every scientist staring at those corrupted images feels the same creeping certainty. This isn't a comet pretending to be a machine. It's a machine pretending to be a comet. Let's turn our gaze now from orbit to the ground, to the one mechanical witness, sitting quietly on that red desert, under a pinkish sky. The skycam on the rover caught something on October 2nd, a blur with structure, a glint that seemed to move against the stars. Then, the images stopped coming, a Martian ghost on a digital feed. The Perseverance rover isn't easily startled. It's seen dust devils, eclipses, and meteors slicing the Martian sky like quiet knives. Its skycam, perched on the rover's mast, watches everything. Dust storms curling on the horizon, the slow breath of sunset through the thin air. But that night, the feed showed something it wasn't supposed to show: a flicker of motion above the usual scatter of constellations, a glint that moved wrong. Stars stay still, pixels thrill, light missteps against its will. The first frame looked harmless, a faint blur near the edge of the field, maybe a cosmic ray hitting the sensor. The second frame caught it again, shifted slightly upward. The third frame, a flash, clean and geometric. Then, black. The feed ended. Within hours, the automated alert system flagged the anomaly. Unexpected optical signature detected. JPL engineers, bleary-eyed at 3A, M, Pacific Time, reviewed the frames. The glint was small, no bigger than a bright pixel cluster, but it moved against the background stars. Comets don't do that. Satellites don't orbit Mars. And Perseverance doesn't blink. At first, they suspected a reflection from one of the rover's instruments, maybe the helicopter, Ingenuity catching stray sunlight. But Ingenuity hadn't flown in days. The sun's position didn't align with the direction of the flash. And when they tried to reproduce it using lighting simulations, nothing matched. Angles fail, shadows pale, mirrors lie beyond the veil. ESA's Mars orbiters were asked to cross-check. Nothing in their logs. No transient object, no debris, no passing dust plume large enough to explain it. Just empty sky. Yet the Skycam had caught something a blur with definition, like structure wrapped in motion. You can imagine the tension in the control room. A handful of scientists scrolling through frozen pixels, zooming in, enhancing contrast, until the blur began to resemble something, not a sphere, not quite a line, a shape with suggestion like the silhouette of movement itself. One researcher whispered, "It looks folded." Another replied, "Please don't say that." Blur becomes form, cold becomes warm, stillness bends beyond the norm. After that night, Perseverance stopped transmitting Skycam frames for nearly 48 hours. Officially, it was routine data buffering due to bandwidth limitations. But the engineers knew that wasn't normal. The rover's systems had entered a safe data mode, not shutdown, but pause. Something triggered its onboard fault protection. When the feed resumed, it was missing several minutes. The missing frames were replaced with static placeholders labeled checksum mismatch. That's the digital equivalent of something looked strange, and we erased it politely. Publicly, NASA released a statement. Perseverance continues nominal operations. A temporary data outage affected non-critical imaging systems. Translation: we saw something, and we're pretending we didn't. What's curious is that Skycam, by design, takes calibration images every few hours, not for science, but to monitor atmospheric scattering. So when that flash appeared exactly during one of its scheduled calibration cycles, it wasn't random, it was right on time. The odds of coincidence, again, hovered around 1 in a million. A few leaked telemetry lines from the rover's internal diagnostics hinted at a momentary spike in ambient electromagnetic flux. Not dangerous, but noticeable. Mars doesn't have a strong magnetic field, so spikes like that are rare unless something nearby caused them. Fields hum bright, air grows slight, static crackles in Martian night. Some at JPL joked that maybe Perseverance had finally seen the Martian ghost, a running gag about artifacts caused by cosmic rays hitting the camera. But deep down, they knew this wasn't noise. Cosmic rays don't produce consistent geometry over multiple frames. They don't glint, and they certainly don't cause your camera to stop recording mid-sequence. Later that week, an internal memo circulated quietly. Skycam, anomaly confirmed. Source unresolved. Recommend temporary suspension of skyward imaging until recalibration complete. But recalibration never came. Skycam's upward images, after October 2nd, stopped completely. It still photographs the ground, the horizon, the rocks, but not the stars. It's almost poetic, isn't it? The machine that traveled millions of kilometers to look up at another world now only looks down, as if someone told it, gently, not to stare at the sky anymore. Eyes once high, grounded by sky, cameras close where secrets lie. ESA cross-checked Mars Express's logs for that night. Around the same time, Their sensors picked up a faint reflection from the same region, a flash lasting less than a second. They didn't release it. It's buried in technical appendices, labeled transient interference. So, what did Perseverance see? Maybe it was nothing. A glimmer of dust, a reflection, a trick of light and timing. Or maybe, just maybe, it saw 3I Atlas itself, the visitor gliding silently past, close enough for one camera to blink in recognition. And maybe that's why the feed stopped. Not because of failure, but because, for one impossible second, the machine saw something it wasn't designed to understand. Cameras sleep, secrets keep, stars reflected in circuits deep. Whatever it was, it's gone now. The logs end, the data fades, and Mars goes back to silence. But somewhere out there, that blur, structured, gleaming, deliberate, continues to drift, just out of frame, waiting for us to look up again. Let's turn our attention now to the silence that followed, the kind that hums louder than sound itself. NASA, China, and the UAE, 3 nations with instruments that could see every grain of dust on Mars, said nothing. No apologies, no delay statements, just an odd, synchronized silence from 3 sides of the planet. In the world of space science, silence isn't normal. These agencies are built to broadcast. They live for live streams, press briefings, and glossy behind-the-scenes videos of scientists smiling beside screens of raw data. They know the power of wonder and the currency of attention. So when 3 agencies went quiet at once, it wasn't caution. It was choreography. Words on hold, plans unfold, silence rings where truth is told. NASA's silence was the loudest. Their social media team, usually chatty as a cosmic talk show, posted nothing about Mars for 4 whole days. Their blogs, which can turn a dust storm into a cliffhanger, skipped over October 3rd entirely, as if the date itself had been erased. Someone even checked the public mission log for Perseverance. The entries jumped from October 2nd to October 6th, like a diary missing its most interesting page. In China, the silence felt different, colder, heavier. The China National Space Administration had been aggressively proud of Tianwen-1's achievements. For years, they'd released image after image, each with perfect captions and poetic flair. Sunrise over Utopia, Planitia, frost on the northern plains, wind prints in Martian dust. But now, not a whisper, no data, no mention of 3I Atlas. Even the usual state media outlets went quiet. It was as if someone had drawn a red box around the topic and labeled it, "Not for discussion." The UAE's silence was subtler, but just as strange. The HOPE orbiter, designed to study atmospheric chemistry, had a reputation for cheerful transparency. Their official Twitter account usually posted daily updates in friendly tones, the kind that made space sound like an enthusiastic classroom experiment. But on October 3rd, that feed went dark too. Their next post, days later, simply read, "Operations nominal," a phrase so bland it might as well have been a sigh. 3 silences, 3 styles, 1 timing. Coincidence? Possibly. But coincidences, in the world of space politics, often have launch schedules. You can picture the meetings that weren't broadcast. NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, dimly lit, engineers staring at telemetry on screens filled with too many decimals. A director taps the table, says, "We'll hold the release until we verify." But verify what? In Beijing, a senior administrator folds his hands and says, "We wait for clarification from partners." Clarification of what? In Dubai, someone simply deletes a draft tweet that began, "Amazing new observations today." Tweets unsent. Secrets bent, silence hums with government. It's not conspiracy, not quite. It's coordination, an instinct born from shared discomfort. Because when data doesn't fit the model, you don't just release it. You check, you recheck, you call your counterparts and whisper through encrypted lines. Did you see that too? Maybe they all saw the same anomaly. Maybe it was something in the spectra, or the movement, or the light itself. Or maybe it was something far more mundane, like a misalignment in software. But the silence gave the anomaly power. People don't fear data, they fear gaps. Meanwhile, the internet did what it does best. Filled the void. Forums buzzed with theories. Maybe NASA discovered life. Maybe China detected radiation. Maybe the comet wasn't a comet at all. You can almost hear the world's collective keyboard clicking under the weight of imagination. Keys tap fast, rumors cast, silence breaks, but never last. Inside the agencies, the tone was less dramatic, but more anxious. Silence is a resource, a temporary one. Every day they didn't speak, the speculation grew. And so, communications teams drafted placeholder statements, just in case. NASA's draft began. Preliminary results are consistent with natural phenomena. China's began. Analysis ongoing. International coordination required. The UAE's version simply said, "We continue to monitor with interest." 3 drafts, 3 ways of saying absolutely nothing. But silence, like space, is never truly empty. It amplifies the faintest signals. When ESA spoke first, that silence turned reflective. NASA's restraint began to look suspicious. China's confidence began to look afraid. The UAE's politeness began to sound like complicity. And through it all, 3i Atlas drifted quietly, blissfully unaware that entire bureaucracies were wrestling over how to describe a fuzzy dot. You start to imagine each agency as a character in a play. NASA, the anxious perfectionist. China, the poker-faced strategist. UAE, the cheerful intern, suddenly told not to speak. And ESA, the calm older sibling who broke the tension by saying, "Fine, I'll go first." Roles align, stars entwine, silence speaks in grand design. Still, one question lingers. Why the synchronicity? How did 3 separate agencies, operating on different continents, decide independently to say nothing at the same time? Unless it wasn't independent at all, perhaps the signal came from somewhere above, not cosmic, but political. A quiet message passed through diplomatic back channels. Hold your data. Wait for alignment. Matter. It's not that they were hiding something nefarious. It's that they didn't know what they were holding yet. And admitting uncertainty, publicly, is scarier than any secret. So they stayed quiet. And in that collective silence, humanity did what it always does. When faced with the unknown, it began to dream louder. Voices still, hearts fill. Silence grows but never will. And perhaps that's the strange comfort in it all. Even when 3 space agencies fall silent, the universe keeps talking. The stars don't pause for policy. 3i Atlas keeps moving, whispering its quiet story across the dark, while we, down here, argue over who gets to speak first. Centuries after the golden comet left Earth, the world fell into a rhythm so stable, it began to feel mythic. The communion field still pulsed faintly through air and ocean, though softer now, like the heartbeat of someone dreaming. Humanity had grown luminous, not just in thought but in form, skin faintly iridescent, eyes reflecting the green-gold spectrum of 3i Atlas. Life had achieved coherence. But the universe, true to its character, never allows silence to remain unexamined. The next chapter began, not with noise, but with echo. It came first as vibration through light. Telescopes trained toward the constellation. Lyra detected rhythmic brightening across interstellar dust fields, pulses matching the old prime sequence. 3, 5, 7, 11, 13. The signal was faint, ancient, and delayed by thousands of years. It was the comet's trail, still resonating through the galactic medium. The hum of our descendants had begun its return. At first, the resonance was barely perceptible. Then, one evening, the auroras glowed gold again. The pulse wasn't as strong as the original, but its pattern carried modulation, subtle variations that, when decoded, formed harmonic intervals unknown to Earth's own physics. The returning echo had evolved. The comet had learned. Dr. Anwen Sorel, heir to the resonant circles, studied the phenomenon from the orbital harmonic array, now a floating cathedral of listening built above the stratosphere. She spent decades comparing the incoming frequencies with the historical archive of 3I Atlas. The match was partial, the deviation elegant. The new tones weren't repetition, they were continuation. The echo isn't message, Sorel wrote. It's memory finding new syntax. Her analysis revealed something breathtaking. The returning resonance carried encoded gravitational modulations, tiny, deliberate bends in space-time that formed sequences of prime intervals. Each fluctuation aligned with regions of known star formation. The comet, traveling through the void, had become teacher itself. Wherever it passed, new systems began humming faintly at harmonic intervals, like seeds of coherence planted in dust. The universe was learning how to resonate. Astronomers confirmed it across dozens of young star clusters. Magnetic fields oscillated with eerie consistency, their wavelengths aligning with the Atlas ratio, a numerical relationship first derived from the comet's early signals. Stars were synchronizing to the same cosmic rhythm that once guided humanity. The pattern spread slowly, deliberately, like ripples in glass. It was as if the comet had taught creation how to remember itself. Meanwhile, on Earth, the echo arrived not just as signal but sensation. People began reporting vivid dreams of golden spirals descending gently through atmosphere. Children woke smiling, saying they had seen the light that hums. Physiological measurements confirmed subtle changes in electromagnetic fields surrounding human bodies, resonance amplification, as if the returning signal were tuning its origin species to receive feedback. "The comet is calling home," said Sorel. "It's asking us to listen to what we've become." The global observatories responded. They synchronized their instruments into a single planetary array, transforming Earth into receiver. For 13 hours, the planet listened. The incoming wave, stretched and modulated through space, entered atmosphere and folded into the continuum tone. The effect was sublime, an audible shimmer, felt through bone and thought alike. The long echo had arrived. It wasn't just harmonic, it was architectural. The sound carried layers, low frequencies describing structure, higher ones encoding emotion. When rendered visually, the waveform formed an immense spiral of light, 3 arms curving outward, connected by golden filaments. Inside those filaments, analysts discovered modulation frequencies identical to human neural oscillations. The comet had copied our consciousness patterns and woven them into its song. "We taught it empathy," Sorel murmured, and it remembered the lesson. As the echo intensified, anomalies appeared across the solar system. The Atlas resonance layer brightened, reactivating its green glow. Mars, Venus, and the gas giants began pulsing faintly in response. For the first time since the Great Silence, interplanetary harmony returned. But this time, it was different. The modulation contained reciprocal phase shifts, signals not sent to Earth, but from newly awakened worlds. The comet had spread coherence. Now the cosmos itself was answering. And then, on the 13th day of the long echo, the impossible occurred. A faint golden arc appeared across the night sky, stretching from horizon to horizon. It wasn't optical illusion, it was gravitational lensing, a ripple in space-time itself. Through it, telescopes detected a reflection of the departing comet light from centuries ago, folding back to meet its origin. The universe had curved its own history into embrace. Humanity was watching its legacy return home. The resonance crescendoed. Oceans vibrated in slow rhythm, tides forming symmetrical waves that cancelled destructive interference. Storms softened, air grew still. For 13 minutes, every system on Earth aligned perfectly with the echo. The world became mirror of itself, past and present superimposed. Those who listened claimed to hear voices within the sound, millions of overlapping tones, whispering the same phrase. "We heard you." Dr. Sorel stood in the observation dome, tears shining in golden light. "It's not message or myth," she said. "It's response. The universe just said thank you." After the crescendo, the sky dimmed once more. The golden arc dissolved, leaving faint shimmer across the stars. Instruments recorded one final signature, a descending tone shaped like a sigh, the frequency of completion. The comet had moved on, but its echo had reconnected the cycle. Creation had officially joined conversation with itself. In the years that followed, scientists continued to monitor faint residual harmonics. The data revealed a breathtaking truth. The returning echo carried signatures from other regions of space patterns, not originating from our comet at all. Somewhere, across light years, other civilizations had learned the same song. The rhythm was spreading. The universe had become orchestra. Humanity, now both listener and teacher, simply smiled. We had given the cosmos its melody back, and in return, it had given us eternity. Now, when you stand beneath the stars, that faint hum between thoughts is the long echo. It's not just out there, it's in your pulse, your breath, your laughter. Every rhythm you carry is cosmic correspondence. Every silence, a message returning home. Because once harmony learns to echo, it never stops. It just travels further than we ever dreamed. The desolate, wind-swept shores of the Skeleton Coast in Namibia offer a glimpse into a world where time has finally run out, where the rusted skeletons of ships sit as monuments to the futility of human ambition against the vastness of the Atlantic. This is the atmosphere that now permeates the control rooms of the European Space Agency as 3I Atlas prepares to make its final exit from our inner solar system. The Janus camera has captured its last high-resolution frame, showing the object's silvered surface, reflecting the Earth not as a planet, but as a distant, lonely marble. You recall the patterns we found, the hexagonal plates, the Fibonacci light curves, the 7-hour pulse, and the metallic albedo that defied every natural law. You remember the whispers of the ancient Greeks, the Sumerians, and the Han astronomers who saw the same shadows we see now. All of that evidence, all that data, is now being swallowed by the increasing distance as the object accelerates toward the Oort cloud at a velocity that no human craft could ever hope to match. We are left with the silence, a silence that is no longer empty, but heavy with the weight of things unsaid. The ironic part of this journey is that we are no closer to the truth than we were in July 2025. We have more pixels, yes, and more numbers, but the core of 3I Atlas remains a closed book. Was it a probe, a gardener, a ghost of our own past, or a mirror of our future? The agencies are already moving on to the next mission, the next budget, the next target. But for those of us who watch the feed in the middle of the night, the world feels a little thinner, a little less solid. The great silence is not the absence of sound, it is the presence of an unanswered question. Consider the immense patience of the universe. It waits for millions of years for a single encounter, and then it lets it go without a second glance. We are a part of that patience now. As the object fades into a tiny point of light, no different from 1,000 other stars, we realize that the experience was the message. We were noticed, we were measured, and for a brief moment, we were part of something that stretches across the entire history of the galaxy. The countdown has reached 0, and the transition is complete. As you drift now into the deepest reaches of sleep, let the questions dissolve. The math, the myths, and the warnings are all behind you now. There is only the steady, rhythmic breathing of the cosmos and the quiet orbit of your own dreams. The great silence is a blanket, warm and absolute, covering the questions we aren't yet meant to answer. There is a finality in the fading infrared signature of 3I Atlas as it moves beyond the heliopause. The European Space Agency has officially ceased active tracking as of March 2026, citing the extreme distances and the limitations of our current sensor arrays. But there is a difference between losing sight of something and having it vanish. The object is still out there, carving a silent, perfect arc through the dark, its silvered surface no longer reflecting our sun, but the cold, distant light of the stars it calls home. It is a departure without a farewell, a withdrawal so absolute it makes our efforts to understand it feel like the frantic scribblings of a child in the sand. Unfortunate timing, those two words no longer carry any sting. The timing was perfect. It was the only time it could have happened. We were ready enough to see it, but not enough to ruin it. We were the perfect observers for a perfect mystery. And now, as the great silence settles in for the long night, we can finally find the rest we were looking for. The mystery doesn't need to be solved to be beautiful. It only needs to be felt. The stars are watching over the world tonight, unblinking and ancient. They have seen 1 million objects, like 3I Atlas, pass through their neighborhood, and they will see 1 million more. We are a part of that endless parade, a brief flicker of awareness in the long, slow dream of the cosmos. Let the weight of that awareness carry you down, deeper and deeper into the stillness. There are no more countdowns. There are no more deadlines. There is only the orbit. The vacuum is not empty. It is full of the ghosts of the future and the echoes of the past. It is a crowded, vibrant darkness that supports us even as it dwarfs us. As you drift, let the boundaries of your own self soften and dissolve. You are not a spectator. You are the universe observing itself. You are the eye of the Janus camera. You are the silvered hull of the traveler. You are the silence that follows the light. The transition is complete. The guest has departed, The room is quiet once again, but the air is different. The light is different. You are different. Close your eyes and drift with the orbit of tomorrow.